OrethaCastleHaley was born in 1939. She grew up in New Orleans after moving from Tennessee with her mother, Virgie Castle, who got a job tending bar at Dookie Chase, and her father, Johnny Castle, who worked on the riverfront. After graduating from Clark High School, Oretha attended SUNO. Like many young people in the early 1960s, she was inspired by the direct action tactics to gain civil rights. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s nonviolent civil disobedience swept through the segregated South, and black college students were on the forefront of their movement. Along with several student activists, Oretha began to organize direct action, nonviolent protest in New Orleans. The Congress of Racial Equality was the primary civil rights organization to which young people in New Orleans gravitated.
There were a lot of young people who started to come to the meetings. She used me to push out front to do some other stuff like students at SUNO, but once we got them in the room, she had the ability to make them all feel guilty about what they were going to do. And that was started the beginning of our understanding about how would we work with the civil rights movement. They talked about this organization called CORE, and Rudy was the guy that was out front to be the first head of the group. After the meeting, I pulled Rudy Lombard aside. I said, man, I think I'd like to be involved with this CORE thing y'all doing, but I don't know if I'm down with that nonviolent thing. I don't know if I could handle that. So Rudy looked at me and he said, bro, I don't know if I can either. He said, you know, all of this right now is theory. So I haven't been tested.
The movement is not without Oretha, because the movement is not a physicality, it's a spiritual of existence.
We decided we were going to start meeting on a regular basis. So we said, well, where do we can meet? Oretha lived at 917 North Tonti. This is where everybody met, at 917. I mean, probably every major person involved with the civil rights movement slept at 917 North Tonti.
The CORE chapter in New Orleans made major contributions to the movement. They were field organizers during the 1963 Freedom Summer in Mississippi, registering black voters, and prior to that, New Orleans CORE members Doris Castle, Oretha's sister, Jerome Smith, the Thompson sisters, Julia Aaron, and others rode Greyhound buses in the freedom rides of the 1960s, which paved the way for the desegregation of interstate transportation.
After the Freedom Riders got beaten in Birmingham and the bus burned in Anniston, Alabama, one of the Thompsons called me and said, we need to get to Freedom House. Freedom House was 917 North Tonti Street, which was the Castle's house.
His house was like a community center anyway. Everybody in the world was coming through there.
We didn't call Oretha and say we coming. We just showed up and called a couple other people because we were ready to continue to ride. Oretha say, just wait a minute. Y'all ain't going nowhere. And I looked at her like, what? She said, we have injured people that we need to find medical care for. We need to get food for them, so you're not going anywhere. We were young and ready to go. Oretha was the one person who stayed real focused on what needed to be done.
In New Orleans, CORE focused on desegregating public accommodations. One of their first targets were lunch counters on Canal Street.
There were only a couple of occasions during that whole period that I ever really remember being frightened. And I sit back and think about it sometimes now. I said, we had to have been crazy. Well, sometimes you got verbal assaults, but somehow people had acid thrown on them while they were sitting at the lunch counter.
One of the things that I really, really admired about Oretha is how brave and courageous she was. We went down to Canal Street, went into McCrory's, sat at the counter. The manager came out, ranting and raving, pulled out a gun, and stuck to Oretha's head. But she sat there as cool as a cucumber, and he just ranted and raved. I took my hint from Oretha, tried to be brave, but I was shaking. And I say, for what? But that was Oretha.
Oretha was a good leader. She could bring people together. She could make them understand things. She did that with me. She did that with her mother.
She was a people's person. Color did not matter. She rubbed elbows with rich, poor, black, white.
I think she was usually fantastic. She was aware of what our conditions were and what we needed to be doing.
When Oretha was doing all this civil rights work, Virgie went on with the program. You know, she didn't understand it like we none understood it. We didn't want our children to go to jail, but they were willing to go to jail for what they believed.
Policemen came out and said, "Stop the singing. You're disturbing the communication center." Well, we had no idea we were sitting there by the communication center. So what did? We sang louder. He came back out and he said, "I told you to stop the singing." We sang even louder. They brought out the police dog, and they brought the dogs as close as they could without the dogs biting us, and then they arrested us.
They would eat here. Sometimes they'd come out of jail dirty. I'd say, go by Virgie, take a bath. So they'd go by Virgie. Then they'd come back here to eat.
When I first sat in, I was working at Hotel Dieu with the good nuns. I knew that when I sat in, I was going to be fired. I knew that. When I reported to work that Tuesday morning, the supervisor said, "Go into the dining room." And when I went into the dining room, there was the good nun sitting there, and she had my paycheck. She did this. She said, "Take it, get out of here, and don't ever come back."
The focus of the movement evolved after the passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. In a majority black city like New Orleans, the civil rights activists turned their attention to building political power.
We had a thing we started off calling the soul ticket. Oretha organized the women who taught me as a soul person how to organize a political campaign, because I had no idea. So Oretha agreed to organize the first phone bank for soul at the Law Street Baptist Church. And Oretha organized these women to tell us how to do the soul bank. And these were a group of white women that we didn't know. I didn't know them, but Oretha knew them, so we trusted Oretha soul and bold. You know, there would be no bold if it wasn't for OrethaCastleHaley. She came up here when the bridge was going to be extended. She was the organizer behind that. She didn't want to be involved in politics until I convinced Dorothy Taylor to run for the House of Representatives. If we all came together, going back to Oretha again, we can define the goal and we can come together as one organization to be able to approach the powers that be. Oretha was the person to be in that room, but Oretha was also the person that was always focused and always said, if you're going to be involved in this politics, you have to understand, to move your people forward, you have no permanent friends and no permanent enemies. And if we don't have some reciprocity within our own people, for people that we elect to office and they go to Baton Rouge or they go to City Hall and they don't have a program for our community, then we have a responsibility to unelect them.
Her untimely death in 1987 left a gaping void in the New Orleans African American community. Her spirit of activism and commitment to black empowerment lives on today in the dozens of people who she touched, taught, and mentored in her life of service for our community.
She built a bridge between us and portions of the white community that we could not have built. I think another part of her legacy was Oretha was a tender person. She cried when she heard about Swerner, Cheney, and Goodman being murdered. She went in the room and cried by herself. She'd come out of the room like she was tough, but I mean, that hurt her to her heart.
Most times during school days when I got home, my dad was in the kitchen cooking, my mom was at a meeting, but we would look forward to her coming home. I would set the table so we could eat together. So we had a traditional type family. She didn't talk about her work much.
She was a very pleasant person. There was no anger in her heart at all. That's another thing that was amazing.
She was mama. I didn't realize, I didn't realize what she was doing. I didn't realize the impact it was having on people's lives then.
She had a goal she set for herself. And no fanfare. No, she wasn't looking for any big thing for what she did. She just thought it was the right thing to do. And she reminded me much of Martin Luther King, the way she believed in what she had to do in her own way.